Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roast number 26. I think we're up to. God, they go fast. Today, we have a few quite unique profiles in some way, but also quite generic in other ways. So, we've got, for example, somebody who's worked in audit, entrepreneurship, and their family business. And we're going to discuss how the AdCom are going to consider that range of work experience. We've got somebody, they also have a perfect GRE score. That doesn't happen often, so we'll talk about how that's gonna how they can maximize the impact of that. We've got a whole bunch of people whose goals are investment banking slash consulting, and that to me is a bit of a pink flag. And so we'll talk about why that is and how you should think about your goals as an applicant. And we have a couple of just very boring profiles, very vanilla, generic profiles. And we'll talk about how those people can spice up those profiles, right? People with like big four consulting experiences and like kind of really generic MBA application profiles and how those applicants can spice those up. All right, Mal, should we dive into the first profile?
Yes, we shall. Okay, first profile. Now this is somebody who's had a non-traditional path from entrepreneurship to public accounting and is now looking for an MBA. Right after college, jumped into the family business. Then that pushed him OP towards a few ventures of their own, which did pretty well, seven-figure revenue range. Eventually, they realized they were missing the finance and accounting side, went back to school for accounting, and now they work in audit at a public accounting firm. The goals are to pivot into consulting or IB next. Some stats here as well. Non-target undergrad 3.7 GPA, that's in health and human services. GRE 340, that's a perfect GRE. And a few questions there. I'll get into those later. Schools they're targeting: CBS, HBS, Wharton Stern, and Yale. What do you think, Sam?
Cool, cool. Right, let's get into an overview of the profile first. So, look, academic, that GRE is immaculate. That's absolutely immaculate. And to be honest, all schools are going to pay attention, are going to do a proper read through of this profile just for that GRE score. Undergrad wise, 3.7. Solid, above the 3.6 average of the M7s. Non-target undergrad maybe undermines that a little bit, but proper subjects as well, and generally solid academics. Very solid academics, I think it's fair to say. No mention of demographics. We don't know anything in terms of age or gender or where they're from. We'll just leave that unmentioned for now then, nor any mention of extracurriculars. Now, that might be a little bit more of a pink flag because we don't know if that's just like they haven't mentioned it or they don't have any. And obviously, if they don't have any extracurriculars, that is more of a concern. Entrepreneurship and corporate and family business. Now, this could swing both ways. It could either be seen as a very broad set of experience, or it could be seen as somebody who has no idea what they want to do. And so it will really come down to the essays. The on the what look, the entrepreneurship is solid, right? Seven-figure revenue range, no mention of profitability. Interesting. There won't be any brands associated with that unless they happen to have heard of the startups and these companies. But I think possibly on the public accounting firm, they might have heard of the brand. Either way, I don't think there's anything in the way of sexy brands on this resume that they are really going to on this profile that they're going to latch onto. In terms of goals, this is probably where the applicant really lets themselves down, to be honest. Long term, I want to pivot to consulting or IB. Now, on the one hand, it's good that OP has their short-term goals figured out, right? Stick with audit, that's fine. But this consulting or IB really just looks like, I have no idea what I want to do, but I have some money. So I'm just going to write consulting and IB. And if you do that, that will severely undermine your application on MBA side. So one of the things we do with clients is really drill into those goals and make sure the goals are solid. So overall, a strong profile, but does need a lot of work to frame the work experience positively and to improve those goals. Basically, the career narrative needs a lot of work, but strong potential for the profile overall.
Okay. OP has a few questions. We can do those one by one. So with this background, How do schools, especially M7s and T15s, how do they look at applicants like this?
Yeah. Look, on the one hand, they will like the breadth. They will like that you've got all these different types of experiences. And you think about how that applies to the MBA itself, like you're going to be able to relate to people from lots of different work backgrounds. You're going to be able to contribute to lots of different discussions. You're going to have this very, very broad background. And interestingly, including on the finance side, which is sort of the hardcore bit that a lot of people struggle with, but also on the entrepreneurship side and on the family business side, like just a really, really good spread. And there's no school that's going to look at that and say, no, we don't want this applicant. If you can frame it well, it could be a really strong positive. I've said already about the brands won't be particularly sexy on the professional side, but again, the big schools can look past that. That's not an issue. One way, interestingly, to kind of mitigate that is, OP's resume, as it stands, is not going to have many recognizable brands necessarily. Maybe the public accounting firm is recognizable. We don't know which one it is, but likely not. One thing OP can do is include names of clients, names of investors. For example, if those own ventures had some investors that are well known, OP can leverage those brands to just show some more sort of pedigree on his or her resume. So that's something that will help. But yeah, basically M7 is on the cards if OP can frame that experience well. Can they explain why they've gone from, I think it was, I don't know, I'll get the order mixed up, but family business, entrepreneurship, public accounting. Is there a common thread going through those? Or are you just a plastic bag in the wind getting blown around in whatever direction, oh, someone got sick, I have to go and do this. Oh, I got an offer here, I'm going to go and do that. Dog chasing cars. Or is there something in common between all of these and you're making these moves deliberately? And that, being able to frame it that way will be massively positive. And so if OP can do that, yeah, M7's on the cards for sure.
Okay. And we mentioned the lack of brand names, both in job and OP's undergrad as well. Does their entrepreneurial track record help offset that?
Yeah, for sure. It does. I think the thing about entrepreneurship is the bar is surprisingly high to get real credibility for this. Particularly, I mean, so I had a client last year who was an entrepreneurship applicant who got into Stanford. Now, there are quite literally thousands of entrepreneurs applying to Stanford because it's got the Silicon Valley vibes, it's got brand, it's got everything. There are so many entrepreneurs applying that the bar for what a qualified, good entrepreneur looks like is very, very high. Now, 7-figure revenue range sounds great, but as I said earlier, no mention of profitability, no mention of any outside investment. And so it might not be as strong, particularly in the M7s, as it could look good, it could look bad. So to give you an idea, the client that I mentioned before, who was an entrepreneurial applicant who got into Stanford, just had a $30 million series, I want to say Series C fundraising round with well-known investors. That is the bar that, as an entrepreneurial applicant looking to get into Stanford, that's the bar you need to be at. I don't think OP is at that level. So yes, they will consider the profile. And yes, the entrepreneurship experience will help, but will it get them there on its own? Probably not.
Okay. And any tips for how to frame this in their applications?
Yeah. I think it's going to be, the key is going to be a common thread. What do I mean by that? So tell a story that flows. You've got this chronological work experience where you've gone from A to B to C. Now, for all applicants, regardless of whether the background is entrepreneurship or whatever, all applicants need to explain why they went from one to the other and what all of these different roles they've had have in common.
Yeah.
Right. And that, for most applicants, that's fairly straightforward, right? I don't know. I started on a leadership development program and I went and I discovered an area that I like and I moved into that area. Fine. That makes sense. But when you've got 3 different completely different pieces of experience, it's a lot more challenging to find the common thread between them.
Yeah.
But that is my big tip, is find something, find a continued purpose, find something that isn't common. The clue here, I think, is around this missing the finance side. There's perhaps a story of self-development here. I was doing one thing, realized my limitation, moved into something to fix it. Realized my limitation again, moved into something to fix it. And now I've realized another limitation and I'm moving into an MBA to fix it. So that could be the thread. Other people's thread, for example, is I want to make this impact, and every move that I've made has been a step closer to making that impact. That's another great way of doing it. So my key tip here is find a continued flow of purpose, find a continued narrative. And if that's credible, then it will be, really, really strong. It will then lead into a very strong set of goals. Post-MBA short and long-term goals. If you're looking for continued development, maybe your short-term goal fills another skill gap in order to get to your long-term goal. Or maybe you've got a particular impact you want to have, and the short-term goal is a way to start having that impact, and the long-term goal is a way to have even more impact. Either way, a strong story followed by strong goals that make sense with those, and followed by detailed research about why the school is the right school. If you're following the career, getting stronger career angle, then there's going to be specific classes you need to get stronger to reach your ultimate goal. If you're taking the I want to have an impact, again, there's going to be specific gaps that you need to make an impact. And those are the classes you're going to refer to. So really detailed research that continues this theme is what's going to be crucial here, is how to frame it. Bit of a long-winded answer there, but hopefully clear.
Okay, OP, I think we've answered all of your questions. Sam, shall we move to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just flicking through the comments.
Stop kidding after the 340 GRE.
A lot of people commenting on the 340. Yeah, well done. It will certainly get you get your profile read, but you're going to need a bit of career narrative work to really maximize it. Okay, next profile then.
All right, profile 2, Chomsky. So this is a bit of an imposter syndrome happening here. Solid but not outstanding. Demographics: 27, female, ORM from an Asian country but not China or India. Applying as an international candidate but has been in the US for 8 years already. No financial aid needed. Academics: 3.7 GPA. Dual degree in business and human computer interaction. Scored 328 on the GRE. Thinking about another try there. Work experience: 4.5 years of experience in tech consulting at a Big Four. Has also some experience with AI and innovation that she wants to highlight, but not sponsored, didn't apply. Extracurriculars: has pro bono consulting and various firm-related initiatives, women orgs, analyst experience, and the like. Great relationship with both recommenders who are also M7, who are both M7 grads, and decent essays. Has hired an ad hoc consultant for essays specifically. Schools: already applied to Kellogg, Haas, and Sloan in round 1, and now round 2, she's focusing on Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. So with all of this, what do you think, Sam? What's her
Okay, let's start with academics. So 3.7 out of 4 is a little bit over the 3.6 M7 average. Dual degree doesn't do any harm, and those are real solid subjects. 328, again, solid, not outstanding, bang in line, more or less in line with the average, a little bit below perhaps, of those top schools. Demographic. Interesting that OP emphasizes Asian, but not Chinese Indian. So basically not as ORM as if they were a Chinese or Indian applicant. I'm imagining like a Korea or a Philippines or something. Okay, 27F, that's sort of bang on the right amount of work experience. 4.5 years is bang on the work experience average of these schools. So in terms of demographics, solid, but not particularly remarkable. Extracurriculars, also solid. Pro bono consulting, various firm-related initiatives, I would say that all of these sound like they're coming through the work environment. So, for example, at one of the big four, if it's, let's say it's Deloitte, if this is pro bono through Deloitte, and the firm-related initiatives, the women's organizations that are through Deloitte, it's this okay extracurriculars, but it's because they're through your own company. You could, a cynic would say, it's sort of an extension of your job. So meh on that. Okay, but not great. Professional tech consulting, very, very common. Seeing a lot of tech consulting applicants at the moment. It's one of the sectors that's going through a lot of upheaval. A lot of people applying to MBA programs as a result. So common and difficult to stand out. I think there was a mention of like design thinking and innovation. Was it AI innovation that could be highlighted? That will be a slight positive on the work experience if it comes out, through the essays, especially. In terms of the brands, look, Big Four is okay. Obviously, they'll have heard of it, but it's not MBB. So, and there's a lot of Big Four applicants. So the key is, are you going to stand out there? I'm not entirely sure. Now, I like that OP is talking about the letters of recommendation. A lot of reviews we do don't mention the LORs, but 2 glowing LORs from M7 MBAs is definitely a strong positive for OP. And then the goals. I didn't see any mention here, but I think they come. No, any goal, any information about goals?
I don't think there
No.
is.
So OP hasn't mentioned their goals. So a potential pink flag that they haven't done that research yet. Not sure. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It'll hopefully this ad hoc consultant has really helped them narrow down their goals. And it's not just an essay editor. We will see. Okay, but so overall, quite a bland profile, very vanilla. I think it's fair to say. Both, all of the academics are sort of in line. The work experience is in line. The brands are known but not stand out. Probably the LOR is the strongest part of the application. I would be inclined to let's wait and see what Kellogg, Haas, and Sloan do before applying to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. But that's obviously getting started is not a bad idea. So overall, like meh.
Mm. So you're saying the chances at HSW in round 2 are lukewarm.
Lukewarm is a fair assessment. I think it'll come down to how strong the narrative is, which is also perhaps a function of the quality of this consultant. We will see. And it also comes down to how spicy the stories are. It's tough to come up with spicy stories in a Big Four tech consulting environment. But maybe OP has done some really good digging and has some really interesting experiences, and those can come through in the essays. But I would say I would probably be, if your OP is open to applying to more schools in round 2, I would also include some safer schools in that list. I think the school that really stands out, which hasn't been mentioned, is Booth. Just in terms of this AI experience, kind of looking at targeting M4 is obviously open to Chicago because they've applied to Kellogg already. I would say OP should be planning a broader set of applications in round 2, not just Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, because there's a strong chance they don't get any admits from any of those 3 schools.
Okay. And between now and round 2, what can OP do to improve their chances?
Yeah, I think it's probably too late to start a new extracurricular. But leadership responsibilities within those extracurriculars would be really nice to see. There's no mention of having any managerial experience in the profile. And at 4.5 years at Big Four tech consulting, the managerial experience is likely to be quite limited. That could perhaps be strengthened in the next few months by taking on some sort of leadership role within their extracurriculars, organizing a new consulting engagement, leading a new consulting engagement, for example, or organizing a new initiative for the women's organization, for example. taking on some extra leadership responsibilities, which will hopefully generate some nice stories, some spicy stories, which, as I mentioned before, is the key gap in OP's, or potentially the key gap in OP's profile. So that could be a double whammy. The other thing is, yeah, OP talks about maybe taking the GRE again. Look, 328 is solid, but OP obviously feels like they have some, something more to give, some more gas in the tank. And in which case, a higher GRE would certainly not do any harm at all. Certainly worth a try. And then in terms of, any other career progression that OP can point towards. So if OP can, for example, manage to squeeze in a bit of a promotion or at least a verbal indication of a promotion coming up, that would also strengthen OP's profile. Maybe OP has a performance review in the next few months and can get some sort of a timeline for their promotion schedule. That might feature in an optional essay, for example, and just give the admissions committee a little bit more reassurance on OP's professional trajectory. So 3 key things they can improve: leadership responsibilities in the extracurriculars, take the GRE again, and get ideally some more promotion visibility in their work.
Okay. I think we've covered everything OP has mentioned. Shall we move on to profile 3?
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Profile 3. Is an MBA realistic or a pipe dream for me? Demographic, male, white, 29 years old, education 3.25 GPA because of undiagnosed ADHD, in finance at a state school in New England. Also passed the CFA level 1. Work experience, about 7 years working in tech at a large asset management firm. 4 promotions, currently a senior software engineer. Has a degree in finance, so all the coding skills were learned on the job. But then this is also why MBA OPs realized they're not passionate about tech and they don't want to be doing this long term. So he has a business mind and he feels his skills are being wasted, and that's why considering an MBA to transition into consulting, asset management, or IB. Located in Boston, wants to stay nearby. A few schools in their reach: HBS, MIT. Target is Tuck, Yale, Columbia, and Stern, and safety would be Boston University and Boston College, but OP's not sure if these are worth it. Little edit, OP's added, scored a 665 on the GMAT.
Okay. Academics first. So the GPA, 3.25. It's low, right? Versus a 3.6 average of the M7s. Pretty sure Stern have an average around there as well. So GPA is on the lower side. The GMAT 665 equates to about a 710 on the old test, also about 20 points below the class averages. So lackluster academics, not a train wreck, but not great either. Demographic, very overrepresented. White, male, but 29 years old, bang on the average, or just a little bit above the average work experience for these schools. So very good in terms of age. In terms of extracurriculars, no mention, as far as I can see, of extracurriculars. Now, again, like we've said before, that could be a bit of a pink flag, particularly people working, so in finance, large asset management firm. If he hasn't had time to do extracurriculars, that would be a pink flag. If it hasn't been mentioned, but there are some things there, then obviously that could be a strengthening for the profile. Professional. Right. Software engineer is a very, very common pre-MBA role. But on the other hand, OP has got 4 promotions, and that shows really serious progress. So that's really, really nice to see. That's definitely a strength. And it sounds like this narrative that I'm kind of seeing take shape is asset management finance. So in the overlap, in the area on the Venn diagram between asset management and finance is OP. And that's a really nice little space to be in. We can talk about maybe how that fits into goals, etc. later. Also, asset management generally is relatively underrepresented in the in MBA world. Distinguish that from private equity, distinguish that from venture capital, distinguish that from investment banking. It's quite a nice little niche to be in. So that certainly helps. Now, in terms of goals, here. consulting an MBA for career change, consulting, asset management, or IB. That is a very, very broad set of goals, especially for someone who's in quite a niche role already. To me, that screams, I haven't done any research. I don't know what I want to do. I just want some money. And so I'm just going to put in some generic post MBA roles. That's really, really undermining OP's profile. So that needs to change. In terms of schools, so overall, a solid profile. A solid profile. There's areas of this, there's areas of that are improving. I also didn't mention on the academic side this CFA. There are some schools that have a specific box for CFA, and this will certainly position you in the finance classes as being, you'll be above the average and you'll be a strong contributor to finance classes. So that also helps slightly. So look, overall, a solid-ish profile. A very, very wide set of schools there. So if we talk about schools, like OP is somewhere here, and they've included schools all the way here. I would say, look, forget about HBS. You're not getting into HBS with these stats. It's not going to happen. MIT, I'd say, is probably out of reach as well. Those reach/targets, that's where OP should really be aiming. I think that's a solid set of schools. And I think these safeties are way too low, way too low. Look, I don't think they would be worth it. I think just to answer that question right off the bat, those schools are not going to give you what you need, and I don't think really are going to give you any progression. You've got 4 promotions in your asset management firm. I couldn't advise you to duck out of that probably quite well paying role to do an MBA at one of these schools. I think in terms of safeties, there's some slightly higher ranked, more appropriate safeties than these. The one that jumps to mind for me is CMU Tepper. So they've got very, very strong tech pedigree, and also I think they would like your asset management angle. And I would say they're a safer school for you. So that's sort of how I see the safety side. Now, I know I've possibly undermined or answered some of the questions already, but whatever. Let's keep going. So okay, profile, narrow down that school list is my kind of conclusion.
Is an MBA, do you think, is it realistic for OP with what can they do to make it more feasible for them?
So you mean this overall question, is it realistic or is it a pipe dream?
Yeah. Is it a pipe dream?
I'd say yes, it's realistic if one, fix the goals. Know what you want out of an MBA and show the schools that you know what you want out of an MBA. I want to leave tech is not enough of a reason for wanting an MBA, right? Lots of other jobs you could just apply to straight away, right? So fix your goals. 2, yes, if you're going to need to write a really strong optional essay to explain this GPA. Undiagnosed ADHD is going to people are going to be skeptical reading that, to be really honest. It could sound like an excuse. An optional essay a really strong optional essay that explains that undiagnosed ADHD, for example, getting a diagnosis now that you can mention in your optional essay, that would be a factor. If you can fix that, I don't know whether that's possible, but if that can be, addressed in the optional essay and maybe with a diagnosis, then again, that will be a factor that will make it potentially realistic. And then finally, the right schools. I think if I was in OP's shoes, I would add Booth to the reach/target list. Why? Look, Booth have a really strong focus on data-driven decision making, and OP's got this tech experience, and using tech in asset management is going to be largely around using data to make investment decisions. So there's a really clear fit there. And that sort of fits into the M7 Columbia kind of reach bucket. I would add CMU Tepper, as I mentioned before, as a safer school, and I would cross off those Boston schools as safeties. I'd say it's a realistic dream. And if OP doesn't have any success this year, I think another thing that OP can perhaps do is reset that GMAT. Overall, academics are not strong here with a very subpar GPA and a GMAT that is also subpar, but the GMAT he can do something about. So if OP is really serious about this and really decides to focus on the MBA route, then maybe a stronger GMAT and a later application, yeah, that's a potential avenue to explore as well. So not a pipe dream, realistic, but work to do.
Okay, OP, I hope you've answered your question. Let's move
And if
on.
not, get in touch. If not, OP, get in touch. I think there's a lot we can do with your profile. I think you'd be a clear candidate to benefit from an admissions consultant. I really do think. Okay, next school, next profile.
Next profile. This is an Indian engineer. Looking to apply in round 1 for NYU Stern, Berkeley Haas, Cornell, Tuck, Booth, and Sloan. Some stats there, yeah, lots of schools there. 7.8 out of 10 GPA, A grades in all quant subjects in engineering. Has taken the GMAT earlier. 710 was what they scored. Believed that was not enough. Then they took the GRE again. He scored a 325. Quant 165, verbal 160. Work experience, 6 years of work experience at an investment bank, year-on-year promotions, currently at a vice president position. Significant leadership experience over the last couple of years. EC's wide range of involvement in social work during undergrad and post-undergrad. Also led a social organization as the president during undergrad. So I see only undergrad ECs there. OP's actually tried to write the GRE again, but hasn't been able to beat their existing score, but willing to try again to see if they can get that up. Yeah, the OP has a few questions as well. We'll get into those later. Sam, what do you think overall?
Yeah, okay. Academics. So 7.8, solid. The A grades in quant subjects will help for sure. There's no question marks over the quant. Certainly from an academics perspective. There are questions over OP's ability to use bullet points, but we will ignore those. So solid academics. GRE a little bit below the M7 averages. GMAT and the old one also a little bit below M7 averages. So okay academics, but not stand out, and certainly not by Indian standards particularly strong. Demographics, yeah, Indian ORM, very ORM. I think it's a male applicant as well. I didn't see any indication, but if it is a male applicant, then yeah, very very overrepresented applications, and yeah, typically a bucket with very high academic grades and very high GMAT. So that's going to be an issue. Okay, extracurriculars. The social work post undergrad will count more than the social work during undergrad. You alluded to this when you were running through the profile. Just to be clear why that is, that everybody has some sort of extracurricular activity during undergrad, right? Well, nearly everybody. It's really, really common. So, whereas not everybody has proper work, has really good extracurriculars when they started work. And so that post-undergraduate extracurricular, that does carry weight. That's really nice. Particularly given the career promotion, the career progression, how to work at an investment bank while getting promoted, doing well, and doing extracurriculars. You're in the minority of investment banking applicants that have got strong recent ECs, extracurriculars. So that's really, really strong. And I like the progression. The career progression is very impressive. No mention of whether it's a bulge bracket investment bank. So for those who aren't familiar with this, there's sort of couple of tiers, just like how in consulting you have the top tier, which is MBB, and then you have the big four, which are kind of the tier 2 almost. In investment banking, you have the bulge bracket investment banks, and then you have the next tier down, and that will be a key factor here. We don't know which one OP is in. Also, we don't know where, I don't think we know where the investment banking experience is. To be clear, like if that's New York investment banking experience or London investment banking experience, that would be considered, more competitive and a level higher. But generally, look, strong work experience. The year-on-year progressions is really nice. And the management experience at an investment bank is also quite unusual. So for those that aren't aware, an investment bank has typically, unlike consulting, it has a very flat hierarchy in lots of parts of investment banking. You tend to have a managing director who has management experience, and pretty much everybody else underneath them reports into the MD. And so to have management experience from in a banking context is really beneficial. And OP is certainly going to benefit from that. Really leverage that. That's really important. So OP has relatively more work experience, 6 years experience now. That'll be more like 7 at the time of matriculation. That is like a couple of years, quite 2.5 years above the average. And the only thing that OP can really do to stand out from the older applicants, the big thing they're looking for to stand out among the older applicants is management experience. And OP has that. So OP, if you're watching, seriously, a big thing here is make sure that your leadership experience comes through, whether it's in the essays, the resume, maybe get your recommenders to write about this as well. Leadership experience is going to be key. So overall, very strong professional background. In terms of goals, no mention of goals, I don't think, but lots to work with here. We can talk about goals in more detail, but I think basically we have a clean slate. Someone with investment banking experience has quite a lot of options, and we can talk about what those might be. So overall, strong profile, work experience doing a lot of the lifting.
Okay. OP's main question is, should OP apply in round 1 to these programs? Or should he not risk spoiling the chance with a GRE and aim for round 2?
Yeah, forget it. So we're currently recording on the 12th of September, 2025. Most of our clients have submitted their applications now, right? OP posted this 3 days ago. So maybe they got a little bit of a head start. But seriously, don't start round 1 applications now. There's a couple of schools that have like October deadlines. At a push, you could squeeze them in. But those are going to be rushed applications. And there needs to be a very good reason. You know, it's the only school in my city that I want to go to. Like, so I've got to get an application in, and I'm only doing 1 application. There are cases where it could work, but by and large, most MBA applicants who should be looking to 7, 8 schools overall in total, you're not going to get 7 good applications in round 1 at this stage. You're just not. So focus on round 2 is my very, very strong answer to that question.
Yeah. And for the GRE, what GRE should OP aim for?
Yeah, I think given that work experience and the strong GPA as well, so it doesn't need to be smashing. The GRE, GMAT doesn't have to be like standout, but something in the ballpark, I'd like high 320s would be a big step up. A 328 would put OP into M7 territory, I think.
Okay. All right. And as for OP's goals, like we saw that OP hasn't mentioned any goals. What kind of goals can OP target as an overrepresented applicant?
Yeah, look, the overrepresentedness of it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't really, that's not really the factor here. The factor here is the professional work experience and what that sets OP up for. That's really what matters. There's a couple of ideas. I mean, our previous applicant was in asset management. OP could pivot into asset management, particularly if OP has some clients who they've dealt with specifically who are in asset management, who they already have relationships. A pivot into an asset manager could work, and we see a lot of investment banking applicants doing that. Talking about that, that's asset management specifically, like the kind of pension funds, but there's also private equity is a buy side possibility. Venture capital is another. Now, be careful with those two. You need to have your own network to break into those. Schools aren't going to do that for you. But also, yeah, if you have your network, if they are, for example, clients you've worked with, those could be really strong goals. And by the way, if you're watching this and thinking, oh, I like the idea of going into private equity, the only reason I say that is because OP already has investment banking application experience. For God's sake, don't put private equity as your short-term goals if you don't have finance experience. Forget it. Okay. Other options for OP, right? Anything that is sort of CFO, treasury in a company that is growing quickly, raising money, that could be very, very strong, particularly if there's like a sector that aligns with OP's investment banking experience. That would be a really strong post-MBA goal. I'm imagining, for example, if your investment banking experience is covering the pharmaceutical sector, for example, and the short-term goal is to join a fast-growing biotech company, to help them raise funding with the investment banks that OP's already worked at, that would be a very, very strong narrative. That's another good one. Finally, returning to investment banking could be on the cards, right? Certainly as a backup plan, right? A lot of schools are increasingly looking for backup plans, and going back to a IB, particularly if you have a return offer, that would also be really, really solid. So quite a few options on the cards. I would pick the one that really A, feels most genuine, and B, feels most realistic given your experience. So like aligning the sector, for example, that will be really important. So yeah, plenty of optionality around goals.
Okay. I think that's all we've got for OP.
Okay.
Shall we move on to our last profile of the day?
Cool. One last thing on that one. Another profile that I feel like I could do quite a lot of good work with. OP, I have investment banking experience. I'll speak the language, and I think we can do good things here. So get in touch. Cool. Next.
All right. Next is 25 male, white, OP graduated with a BBA in finance, 3.6 GPA from a private East Coast school. Some undergrad leadership in their student government association and student organizations. Work experience, I see 3+ years total, one in a pharma rotational program, which OP left due to family and health issues. Due to a family health, okay, it's a yeah, and 2+ years at a large CPG, think Kellogg, Smucker, Hormel Foods in corporate FP&A, promoted to senior analyst, one of the youngest to be promoted in that role. Currently is working on capital planning, cash flow forecasting, and presenting, and is also presenting to senior leadership. So lots of really good leadership experience in that. Some stats: GMAT 680. OP's goals are to pivot to IB strategy or into a startup or growth role. OP wants networking and recruiting opportunities from their MBA. OP's targeting Darden, Stern, and McDonough, Dream Schools, CBS, and Sloan. And a few other tidbits in the IC. OP is also another extracurricular is volunteering with a Korean foundation and is learning Korean. So yeah, what's your analysis here?
Okay. So 3.6 GPA, bang on the average of the M7s. So no issues there one way or another. Not particularly strong, not particularly weak, solid. 680, also, well, probably 50 points below the 730 average of the M7s. Not ideal, but also not a train wreck. So academics, okay. It's certainly not going to be what gets you into the top schools, but okay. Demographic, white male, very overrepresented. Interesting, this Korean angle though. When I first read this, I hadn't made that connection, but there's a non-Korean working with a Korean foundation, learning Korean. There's a really interesting cultural kind of gap there that OP might want to build a narrative around. That's quite interesting. So demographics, yes, overrepresented, but could be work to his advantage potentially. Professional. There's always solid representation in MBA programs from the CPG cohort, the consumer packaged goods. It's like these kind of companies. Always solid representation from them. In fact, John Cheng in our team also worked at General Mills and was in that sector. So it might be an interesting introduction for you there, OP. But basically a solid professional experience, slightly on the younger side, right? I agree. I count 3 years of work experience, slightly below the 4.5 or so years of average, but that's not necessarily an issue. 25 is also fairly young, so OP is certainly not in a rush, but okay in terms of demographics. I think the brand will potentially help. That's one thing that's nice here is this CPG, like everybody's heard of Kellogg. Literally everybody has heard of Kellogg. So that could potentially be a positive. I think that this leadership development program could also potentially be a positive, but you're going to want to really write an optional essay about why that came to an end. This family health issue, you need to convince them that you weren't pushed out, that you jumped. And that, it sounds like there's a good reason for that, but yeah, explain it. In terms of goals, now, I think given the FP&A experience, pivoting to from corporate finance to IB strategy, startup growth role, I'm a bit skeptical of the IB part of that. Why do I say that? Like, investment banking applicants that successfully pivot into investment banking have typically got some sort of global markets experience, right? So if you're, for example, working at a big four consultancy in a M&A advisory role, that is a strong feeder into investment banking. If you're working in a corporate finance role where you're dealing directly with the investment bankers, you also have your IB connection. That can work as well. But I'm not seeing much in the way of, fundraising or treasury necessarily here. I'm not sure that investment banking narrative is going to be particularly strong. Now, obviously, once you're on the MBA program, you can still recruit for IB, but I'm not sure it's the best goal to write about. I think the strategy or startup growth is probably more compelling, depending on which aligns best with OP's previous experience. So potential on goals, need narrowing down a little bit more. Want the networking and recruiting opportunities from an MBA? Okay, that should be a part of your why MBA answer, but not all of it. Schools are going to look at that and think, well, you need to make friends with a good recruiter then, right? There's
Yeah.
no mention of like needing the financial valuation skills. That's the big thing. What OP really needs an MBA for is the corporate val classes, right? Learning how to do a DCM model, DCF model, for example. Like, those are the things that you need an MBA for, OP, not the networking, really. So, and there's no mention of that. So it looks like OP might be a little bit naive on that front, and really needs to do a bit more school research and sort of MBA research to get that narrative and those goals shaped up. But anyway, potential is there for sure. That's everything I've got at the moment in terms of the overall evaluation. Like, could be quite vanilla, could be quite strong. Depends on what OP does with the goals, whether OP has strong stories, etc.
Okay. And in terms of schools, so OP is targeting T15s and M7s. I see a good mix there. Is OP's profile competitive enough for this with 3 to 4 years of work experience?
Try for M7, but for me, OP's bread and butter is T15. I worked last year, a year before last, actually, it was, with an Asian male client in a FP&A role, not in CPG, but not far off, whose goal was IB. We used that goal, and it was solid. Who applied and got into several of these schools, including Cornell. Now, Cornell is a good finance feeder school. Not quite M7, but it is Ivy League. I think that is where OP should really be focusing. Top of the T15 bracket, right? Darden is in there, Stern is in there, but I would also think Cornell, the Yales of the world. That is, I think, where OP should be focusing, and is where OP has a strong chance of a really good MBA and good experience. I mean, by all means, apply to CBS, apply to Sloan, but I think those are going to be a real stretch, particularly with this GMAT. If OP can get that up to 730, then maybe CBS and Sloan are on the cards. But at the moment, I think that's a bit too much of a stretch.
Okay. And about the career narrative, like if OP, what can OP do there to be more eligible for M7s in the top of the T15s?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see OP identify something in this experience, in this work experience, and potentially from undergrad, but usually it comes from this work experience. Identify some unusual niche that OP finds interesting, right? Some unusual aspect of this. Maybe it's some new type of food that OP finds really interesting. Maybe OP is a gym buff and really likes the protein market, for example. Something unusual about the experience that OP can sort of latch onto and say, I really like this. and I want to focus my career on it going forward.
Mm-hmm.
A strong angle is going to be key. Another angle could be going like really building the CPG focused story and finding a like doing strategy within CPG still. So saying, look, I really like the CPG market, maybe even have a return offer from the company I'm at, but I want to go into a different role within this particular sector. In a world where schools are very focused on your employability after the MBA, that relatively small post MBA pivot, it would be easily explained and would be quite attractive to the schools. So that is something that OP can really do to kind of make themselves competitive for the top of the T15s. Maybe the M7s if OP's GMAT can get a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm. Anything else OP can add?
Yeah. There's two things I think here. The first one is this Korean angle. There's a story here, I think. I can't kind of keep coming back to it. There's a story here. Where did this interesting learning Korean come from? Is there a angle of, for example, like working at a Kellogg in like North America, but wanting to maybe move to the Korean market and grow the market there? Like playing that Korean angle to me is one of the things, probably the most unique thing about this profile that I think OP should really think about. If I was working with OP, it's one of the things that I would really spend a meeting really focusing on to try and see if we can build that unusual angle into OP's career narrative. So that's one. This is where you're unique. Try and use it to your advantage. And the second thing is, I would also, a bit less interesting, but sort of still important, is I would dedicate part of the optional essay to explaining why OP left that rotation program. Right, pharmaceutical rotation programs are pretty high, pretty in demand. It's quite impressive to get into that after undergrad. Why did OP leave? It sounds like OP's mom got sick and had to go home to care for her. Now that's a good reason, but really needs fleshing out in the optional essay. What do I mean by fleshing out? Like go into quite a lot of detail, right? What was she diagnosed with? Right? Why were you needed to help? Was it to hold her hand, or were you literally driving her to see the oncologist? Like really quite an uncomfortable level of detail is required there in the optional essay, so that just to answer that question about why OP left the pharma company. That's another thing to bear in mind.
Okay. I think we've covered everything for OP.
Okay.
And all of our profiles for today. Can we move on to the bonus
look,
question?
OP, look, there's someone's mentioning Cornell Johnson as well.
Cornell, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's other people saying that. Another person saying GMAT class 680 is low for the M7. That's sort of echoing. That's also the point I made. Another person saying not with that GMAT.
Less
So
delicate.
there seems to be a few common themes coming up here. Hopefully we've gone a little bit further than just saying, you need a higher GMAT. But yeah, it's definitely a factor.
Yeah. All right. Bonus question for today.
Okay.
MBA application weight breakdown. So OP's curious, how do you guys think the different parts of the application are weighted? Interview, GRE, GMAT, LORs, essays, work experience, etc., in terms of percentage? And do you think it's changed over time?
A very interesting question. It's one that I see fairly often, in the forums and stuff, and I get asked it. I'd like to let me open with an anecdote. I think, look, basically, percentages is not really the right way to look at this. Let me open with an anecdote. Now, I'm in the process of buying a motorbike, right? And what I'm looking for, as I buy a motorbike, is the whole package, right? I want to buy a good motorbike. Now, if I see a motorbike for sale, I'm not going to buy the one with one really good photo. Nor am I not going to buy one because it's got one bad photo on it. Right? So equally, if it's got a well-written description, that's not going to be enough for me to buy that motorbike. What I'm looking at is the entire picture that all of the photos, all of the descriptions give of that motorbike. Do I feel there's enough information? You know, there's only one photo. I'm probably not going to be interested. Is there enough information? Have they written all the essays? Right? There's a sort of a parallel here. So it's not that the photos are worth more than the description. It's that together, what picture do they paint?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of see MBA applications in the same way. It's about the whole package. And frankly, all of the photos and all of the descriptions need to be perfect. There's no way around it. Now, I would say that kind of going a bit deeper than this is there are still ways that you can make your profile better and things that they really care about. And I think the thing that the schools this round, and actually it's interesting because I see some of the comments down here talk about this as well, is what we're seeing at the moment that's really, really important is employability. Do all of your resume, LOR, essays scream employability? Do you have so what does that mean, right? Do you have experience in kind of somewhat tangential to your target roles, or are those a massive leap that you're never going to make realistically, right? Employability. One, do you have a sensible backup plan? Or is it, I really want to make this massive pivot and I haven't really considered anything else? That is a red flag for you in terms of employability. Do you need a visa for your goals? Or is it a job in a market that you already have work permission for? Or is there a visa component to this as well? Because if so, that makes you less employable, particularly in the US in this job market. So that's another factor. And they're going to use the entire application to get this information. Now, what they might do, given the two-stage nature of the MBA application process, is they're going to look at the LORs, resume, and essays first. And they're going to have enough inspiration from those to make the interview offer. But if there's a question mark, they might use the interview to check that. Just like I see everything that I think I like in the motorbike advert, but there's no photo of the bike from behind. One thing I'm going to check when I visit that bike is it hasn't got a smashed backlight. And just like in the interview process, if there's something that's been missed in the application, but they like it overall, they're going to check that in the interview process. They're going to make sure they ask a question about that gap on your resume, about that role that you left very, very quickly. They're going to ask that question if it's not answered in the application. So that's how I kind of look at the application versus the interview. Now, we want to put percentages onto this. One thing I can put a percentage on is that ballpark, the interviews is about 50% of people who are interviewed get through the interviews, get an offer. There's no mention, what we haven't talked about yet is the GMAT. This is obviously a big factor. Interesting. The GMAT, we think, is actually getting more and more importance at the moment. Why? Because it's one of the only parts of the application that can't be gamed in a world of AI. Now, let's be clear. They are looking for genuine, authentic, not AI-dominated essays and LORs. But with the right, tools, some applicants are able to write applications that look authentic with using AI. But the GMAT, there's no way around. There's no AIing your way around GMAT, right? So the GMAT is actually perhaps taking more weight than it was previously. Do you think it's changed over time? I think the GMAT and the GRE is becoming increasingly important. It's not huge, but there's definitely that. It seems to be going in that direction in terms of the weight it carries. So I think overall, yeah, I know I've gone a convoluted route and I've answered in terms of motorbikes, but still of some value.
All right. What about work experience? What do you think? How's that changed? Is it more with the job market right now?
Yeah, I think conducive, like in line with what I was saying about the job market being the key focus, work experience is going to be especially important. It's going to be super, super important. It's going to be particularly in combination with your goals, right? Strong past performance with goals that are going to leverage that strong past performance. That's a winning recipe.
Yeah.
That's really, really nice. So I guess what you could say is maybe a little bit more importance on the work experience and the GMAT, and maybe a little bit less importance on the interview essays and LORs, maybe, but doesn't really how to think about it. Think about the whole package. Every single part needs to be perfect to really maximize your chances.
Right.
All right.
I think that's us done for today.
Awesome stuff. Quick skim through the comments. It does look like everybody's sort of giving this idea of, it's a difficult job market. Career goals and clarity are key. Some schools, care more about career clarity than others. That's sort of fair. We have an AI response there. That's not very interesting. And we have somebody else saying that the GMAT GRE is important. So mix of views there, but yeah, hopefully it's definitely an interesting discussion and something I'm sure people will keep wondering about for a long time. Okay, so I think we're all done in terms of the prompts. Mel, thank you very, very much again for joining, for throwing these questions together. Mal is diligently scouring through Reddit, constantly looking to find these good profiles to be reviewed. So if you'd like your profile to be reviewed in an upcoming session, DM us and we will do our best to include it. And yeah, thank you very, very much, Mel, and I will see you soon.
Yes, happy Friday.